Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Calvin, We the Species. It's August 25th, and I'm with Gary Hill. And actually, there's probably a short story to be written about how Gary and I finally have gotten together. We've had quite a journey to bring us together and to do this. Gary's a busy guy, and of course, I'm a card-carrying member of AARP. So I'm not busy that way. But Gary, as we unpack the life and times of Gary Hill, you'll see how many things he's got on his plate. Actually, hey, here's the title of this interview. It's Gary Hill, publisher, Music Street Journal, author of science fiction, horror, spooky ventures, tales of wonder. So there's a lot.
Wonder and dread.
Fine, jump in. I mean, there's a lot to unpack, and that's why I guess it took us so long for me to pin Gary down out there in the middle of the country. So I've said my intro. Now to introduce you officially, Gary Hill. If you want to do maybe just a quick little bio of yourself, and then we will start our thing. Take it away.
As you said, I published Music Street Journal, which I started in 1998.
Which is this?
Correct.
Right.
And it started as strictly a website. Well, actually, it started as a Word document sent out to a bunch of subscribers, and then it became a website. And now it's a series of books with an internet presence also. Most of the articles are also on the internet. And then in 2006, I published my first book, Strange Sound of Cthulhu, music inspired by the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. And that basically came about because I decided it was time to do a book.
A hell of a cover, by the way.
Yes, thank you. I didn't do that cover. A gentleman named Joseph Vargo, that's his artwork. And he has a band called Nox Arcana, which you should check out. It's very like keyboard oriented, creepy sort of music. It's dark, it's cool. But anyway, I decided I wanted to do a book, and it seemed like I was into Lovecraft and I was also into music. So it just sort of seemed the best thing out there for me to delve into books with. And so I did that. And then I started writing a lot of other stuff, some fiction stuff, and that wound up leading eventually to Tales of Wonder and Dread Publishing, which we do science fiction and horror with that. And I think we've put out 21, 22 books so far.
Wow.
With 2 more coming out on September 4th. And then I decided I wanted to delve into video. So I started Spooky Ventures to do video stuff. And also we've got merchandising. We got a whole line of t-shirts and all kinds of stuff with cool. Our slogan is keep it spooky. So everything's got that on it pretty much. So, and that pretty much catches you up. I've got a novella, Wizard Song. It's, I think that actually grew out of a love of science fiction and music. And then I've got another one, The Homestead, which is horror, which is like a home invasion horror story, which is kind of cool, I think. And those both came out last year. So I think that kind of catches you up.
Okay. So that's a little piece of a bio of you. How about if we talk more about Music Street Journal and more? Can you tell me more about it? And I know you briefly touched on it.
Yeah, so I had some friends that were doing something called Music News Network, and it was a little e-zine that was mailed out, I don't know, every month, every 2 months, something like that. And I really liked what they were doing, and I thought, I could do something like that because I've been a musician and I've been a huge music fan my whole life. And so I thought, well, I'll get into doing that. And I was on AOL at the time and in a lot of little groups for music and stuff. And so I asked some people if they'd be interested in reading it, and I got a bunch of subscribers, put it together as a magazine. The idea was always like a magazine. And I sent out the first issue. I think I had 28 subscribers. And then within about a year, I had gone to a website. At one point at the peak, I think in the early 2000s, we were running about 1 million or more unique visitors a month.
Wow.
Now, I have no idea. We redid, the site was redone in 2008, I think, and I haven't seen any visitor stats since then. Honestly, I don't think people read music reviews as much now since they can just stream music. So I don't know that the viewers are what their visitors were what they were then. But in any event, then I started for the 20th or for the 20th anniversary. I thought, well, it would be a really great idea to catalog all these into books. And I started doing them all as books, putting all the articles in, releasing as books one at a time. And I realized, I could just as easily do each issue as a book as well. It's just a little more work. So at that point, we started releasing them all as books simultaneously as they went online. And so each one is a book, and there's always a printed edition exclusive article in there. So you get a little more content with the book, but most of the stuff is still online. So that's pretty much it. We've got a primary focus on progressive rock, with also some heavy metal focus, but it will cover pretty much anything. Half of every issue is prog, though.
That's, we talked before we went on air on some of our commonalities. This actually, today's the first time we met. Usually sometimes we do some green room stuff a week or two before, but we've got some commonalities. We both wear hats. I've
Yeah, I'm a hat guy.
Yes, I'm a hat guy too. And then the music. I did some journalism when I was starting out, covering the Asbury Park music scene. So I'm always so interested, and I'll kind of follow up on my own Music Street Journal. So moving along, your first book was, and I The Strange Sound of Cthulhu. Is that
I think it's Cthulhu, but I don't know. Everybody pronounces it differently.
The music inspired by the writing of H.P. Lovecraft. What is this story about? I should show it again. What is it about, and what was the original concept of this book?
Well, it's a nonfiction book, and
Nonfiction.
Yes, the author H.P. Lovecraft lived in the early part of the 20th century. He died in 1937, I think. He's considered by many to be one of the founders of weird horror and stuff. He was also not necessarily the nicest guy. He was very much, well, he was a nice guy if you knew him, apparently, but he was very racist and very xenophobic, which was kind of a thing of the time, but it comes across in his writing sometimes. But he's a huge influence on a lot of writers, including Stephen King and a lot of people. So I was a fan of some of his writing, and I found that there was a lot of music that I knew about that had been based on his stuff. And so I thought, well, I'll do a book about that. And I managed to link up with a lot of people. I got questions sent to Geezer Butler from Black Sabbath, who answered them about one or two of their songs. And there were other people I couldn't get a hold of. But it was interesting. I found that a lot of the people who were musicians who were into Lovecraft stuff, it was almost like a family or a clan. Everybody was very friendly and very enthusiastic about the project. And so in the book, I devoted a chapter to Lovecraft himself, and then went off into different genres of music and sort of looked at the lyrics and the music that they did. And if I could get a hold of the artists, I asked them some questions about the work. And it's a pretty cool book. Lovecraft scholar St. Joshi said it was one of the most interesting books he's read. He did the foreword to the book for me. And so it's gotten really good. People have really liked it. It's been well received. And I'm actually working on a new version for release on the 20th anniversary in 2026. So, because there's a lot more Lovecraftian music out there now. So I thought I should catch up with it.
Wow. I don't know anything about him, but if some of it sounds like funereal kind of stuff, and is that some?
There's all kinds of different music. Everything. There's a lot of heavy metal, but there's also progressive rock, punk, some jazzy sort of stuff. Blue Oyster Cult did a few songs based on the stuff. So it's all kinds of different music.
Okay. I got to check that out. That is kind of fascinating. I love what I do because I discover things that I never knew about. Uh, Lovecraft, and so it kind of broadens the horizon. So now, similarly, you have a second book called Poetry of the Air, a collection of love letters from musicians to music.
Yes.
So can you talk about how and where and why this came about?
Okay, that one, it was funny when I started doing Music Street Journal, I sort of in my head had ideal interviews I'd like to do. And one of the things I'd noted as a fan of music is that when you get music fans talking about music, there's a certain passion that makes the conversation so interesting. And so I thought, what if you talk to these musicians not about their music so much as about the music that they liked that got them into music?
Wow.
And so that was the whole idea of the book. And I got to interview tons of people for that book. Several members of Yes, a couple from the band Rage, Tommy James from Tommy James and the Shondells, and Bunny Carlos from Cheap Trick, who are hometown boys for me, and just lots and lots of people. And it was funny because at first I thought, well, I don't know how to assemble all this. And ultimately, I was trying to make a narrative out of it. And I decided I was trying to get in the way of it. And I figured that the interviews were the important part. So I wrote an introduction, a little bio of each artist, and then a couple closing sections. And other than that, I just included their interviews as they were. So I thought that was the best way to respect the artists and their stuff. And that's another one I'm going to do a revised and expanded version of for the same year, 2026. So keep an eye out for that one.
What a great mechanism to interview musicians to find out what inspired them to get into music. I never even, I think that's great.
What was really funny about that was when I started doing Music Street Journal, the one artist I really wanted to talk to about that was John Anderson, formerly of Yes. Now, at the time he was in Yes, and he was one of the interviews I got for the book. So that was kind of really appropriate.
Wow, that is great. Really, I'm sitting here listening to you, and you're kind of expanding my horizons, which well, you are, because I didn't delve into enough of this beforehand because you just don't. But you quoting actually Jim Morrison, you lit my fire.
Gotta love Jim.
Oh,
the Lizard King.
Oh, I just saw something last week, some blurb on Jim Morrison. Just he was just brilliant, just brilliant.
Brilliant and troubled.
Yeah, troubled, and maybe that's part of the brilliance. Same thing with Janis Joplin. I posted a picture on my wall. I had gone to a Woodstock memorial sort of by a local museum here, Monmouth Museum, and they did a thing. I think actually it was 2 years ago in conjunction with the 50th anniversary of Woodstock. So it was 2 years ago, and they brought in Elliot Landy, who was the official photographer of Woodstock, and they had a whole exhibit. I got to interview him a little bit and talk to him, and the exhibit was wonderful. I mean, there was shots of Janis Joplin drinking some wine before she went on stage. But I mean, these were real wonderful pictures of Woodstock. Um, Moving along, you also run a publishing imprint called Tales of Wonder
And Dread.
and please talk about this, because you go from music and now you go into some spooky things. So
Yes, somebody asked me in an interview a couple years ago what the connection between all the stuff is, and the connection is me. It's just my interests. And in addition to music, which I've always loved, I was a big fan of spooky things. I remember as a kid, little kid, running home to watch Dark Shadows every day because I loved the vampires and stuff, and I loved the Universal monsters and all that. So that was one of the things that I really loved, and I love science fiction too. I was a huge Star Trek fan from when I was a little kid. I can actually remember I was 3 years old at the time watching Star Trek first run, so that was pretty cool. And so all that sort of connected together in Tales of Wonder and Dread. I actually did a collection called Dark Dreams and Weird Worlds, which was a little compilation book that I did with science fiction and horror stories from different people. And that was what gave me the idea to launch Tales of Wonder and Dread, because that worked so well. And I thought, well, this got well received. We had a lot of great stories. I could do a publishing imprint like that. And so that's what I've launched. And we've done 21, 22 books since then. A lot of them, some of them are just my books. A lot of them have stuff from other people. I did a series of books on Rockford, Illinois cemeteries, which are mostly just photographs that I took. And I saw somebody said that they weren't like really great documenting the cemetery. That's not the point of it. The point was I wanted to capture the fact that, to me, a cemetery is sort of a work of art. It's like an experience, it's a place. And I wanted to capture the beauty of it. And that was my point in doing those books. And I can see, you know, I actually said something in the introduction of those, something about, well, this isn't going to catalog all the graves in the cemetery. That's not the point of it. But obviously the person didn't read that. But anyway, we've done, the most recent one we've done is called Spooky Houses. And it's a collection of stories about spooky houses, some of them fiction, some nonfiction. I've got one called Spooky Stories, which is just what you would expect, except there's some poetry and some nonfiction and fiction from both classic writers and modern, some of my friends. And then I've got one coming out called Relics, Remnants, and Artifacts, which is just sort of stuff that I've published in different places over the last few years that haven't gotten put in one place, so they're all in one place. So yeah, we do anything science fiction, horror, or generally macabre kind of things that most people would think of as spooky, we do with that.
Also, before we went on air in the little green room session, we talked about cemeteries, and I shared some stories with you. And I'm thinking here as I'm talking to you, it might be a cool idea for you and I to get back here and actually record our discussion on cemeteries. I think
we could do that. Yeah.
You know, just,
round two.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm game for it.
And we'll talk about that, because I'm just getting that inspiration listening to you, and I have some to add, and you have some to add, and that's another one of the commonalities besides our hats.
Right.
We've got this affectation with cemeteries.
Right.
And I view them as places of history and beauty.
Yeah, there's that. Places of history, places of beauty. I find them relaxing and comforting somehow. I don't know why, but I do.
And I agree with you. And actually, when I was in college in Ohio for a couple of years before I went to Rutgers, I don't know why I'm saying this, but I used to take one of my girlfriends to the cemetery. It was just a nice place to be. Yeah, just to walk around, and it was in some strange, convoluted way, kind of romantic, I guess.
I can see that.
So you and I, we just came up with that idea. So you've already kind of touched on it, but if you maybe elaborate a little bit more, the connection between music, you just said it, but say it again, the connection between music and spooky stuff.
Well, I mean, it's me is the connection. It's the things I like. That's, but oddly enough, I mean, Lovecraft had at least one story based on music, and there's, the music based on his work. And then I've got some stories that are based on music, and also spooky stuff. So I don't know, there's a connection, I suppose. There's always been spooky music too. Look at some of the music to John Carpenter's movies that he's done.
Yeah.
He does some brilliant music. The guy is a brilliant musician. Sorry, I'm a huge John Carpenter fan. So
he did Halloween, right?
yes.
Which also takes place in Illinois, Haddonfield.
Right, but it's filmed in New Jersey, I think. If I remember right, Haddonfield, New Jersey. Isn't there Haddonfield, New Jersey?
Yes, there is.
And that's actually where Sandy Hill was born and raised there. And that's where the name for Haddonfield came from that movie.
Oh,
so there's a nice little piece of synergy there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I know Haddonfield. It's a great town. It's right near Philly. Wow, I didn't know that. What I'd like to do now is just ever so quickly go off topic and ask you just one of my favorite questions to ask. I think I know the answer, but I don't. But all right, so here's the question. Excluding family or friends, somebody living or dead you'd like to spend a day with. And it could be a couple. There's no rules here.
Actually, I think living. It's actually a family. There's a family. I call them the Addams family. A lot of people call them the Addams family. It's John Addams and Toby Poser and Zelda Addams, and they make these brilliant independent horror movies that I absolutely love. And I'm friends with Toby on Facebook, and they all just seem like such cool people. They're also a band, so they have the spooky and the music thing going. And I think they would be so much fun to hang out with. So yeah, that would be who it would be.
Perfect. There you go. Perfect. Great answer. I thought I knew the answer, but I didn't. That's a great answer. So moving on. You also did two novellas, a short novella called, the first was called Wizard Song.
Correct.
And I'll actually hold up my last little visual aid here. If you can kind of talk about that venture.
Okay, that was kind of an interesting one. When I was 12 years old, I discovered progressive rock by discovering the band Yes. And I was just taken by it, and it sort of changed my whole thinking, and that joined my interests of comic books. I was a big Marvel Comics fan, and also science fiction because I was a huge Star Trek fan. And so I got the brilliant idea to put them all together into a story. And I did it as a comic book as a kid. And it was a story about a progressive rock band that had something else to them that I'm not going to give away because it's in the book. But that they were more than just a progressive rock band, and they get abducted by aliens and drawn into this whole big battle between good and evil. And that story stuck with me over the years. And then in the 90s, I tried to write it as a novel. And when I wrote it as a novel the first time, it was just awkward. I had some cool ideas about ways of telling time and all this stuff in it because the planet had several suns, and I worked all that. It was actually kind of brilliant, but it was actually really awkward and made it hard to read. And so I never got past the first draft on that. And so in recent years, I got the idea again to revisit it. And I wrote it into a short novel and put it out. And I'm actually really happy with it. It's a fun story to me. It shows the power of art and music against evil.
Yeah.
And the idea that people teaming up together are a lot more powerful than just one person. And some other things about and that. And it's just, I think it's a fun. I think it could be adapted into a nice popcorn summer movie.
You mentioned UFOs. It's funny. Getting together Sunday with a gentleman who's had lots of contact with UFOs.
Mhm.
He's written a book, and I find that fascinating. And I also interviewed not too long ago that he was #2 man at NASA education for 35 years. And I interviewed Donald James, and I did ask him, am I allowed to ask you any questions about UFOs? He said, sure, you can ask me anything you want. I said, well, tell me about UFOs. And he kind of went off topic rather quickly.
I'll tell you a little interesting tidbit that I have. You're getting an exclusive here. I have literally only told a few friends about this. Now, I was a kid, so keep in mind, my memories may be wrong, but I was in a hospital when I was a kid, 12 years old. I had detached retinas, and I had to have surgery at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And they had didn't have a kids ward for the eye surgery back then. So they just had the adult ward, and they put me in a ward. It was like a big room with 12 other people, all adults. And I befriended this guy. And the funny thing was, I was a big UFO enthusiast back then. So I knew who J. Allen Hynek was. This guy told me that that's who he was. He looked like him. He told me lots of stuff. And I mean, he was from the area. He could very well have been in there having eye surgery. I've never been 100% sure it was him, but we had some pretty interesting conversations.
Interesting.
And I don't know that it wasn't him.
Interesting stuff. That in and of itself is a whole new world. We're not going to touch that now. You also released a book called Spooky Houses.
Yes, that one just came out recently. And that's kind of a cool book. It has a lot of classic public domain stories by H.P. Lovecraft, Edgar Allan Poe and stuff, but it also has some great stories from myself. My wife has a couple nonfiction pieces. Rick Hale has a couple nonfiction pieces. We've got a lot of more fiction pieces. I can't remember who else in this one now. I've been promoting. Oh, Kevin Wood has a fiction story, and I've got some fiction stories. I just happen to have it sitting here, but yeah, it's a pretty interesting. Everything is. It's funny because I came up with the idea before the pandemic hit, and honestly, once the pandemic hit, book sales kind of tanked, and I felt that people didn't know where their money was coming from, and I didn't really think they ought to be spending it on books. So I decided to pretty much shelve the book publishing, and so it got delayed. It was supposed to come out last year, and I went ahead and put it up this year. I suppose Spooky Stories Inside a House would have been better last year, but I wasn't going to do that. It just seemed. I only put out the 2 books I put out last year were Wizard Song. Mm-hmm. and another novella, The Homestead, which is a homebound book. And I only put those out because they were my books only, and I just wanted to get them out there. I was like, if people buy them, great. If they don't, that's fine too. I want them out there. So this year I've turned back towards trying to put out books to sell. And,
okay. Are you on Amazon? I'm looking at your
some of the
where's
stuff.
The best way for people to kind of find, is it GaryHillAuthor.com?
Correct. Because Amazon, I was publishing everything to Amazon for a while, and I got fed up with the fact that in order to have it on Amazon, if I wanted to say, let's say I wanted to make $5 off of a book, well, I couldn't, if I did that at Lulu, I couldn't sell it at Amazon because I'd still be losing money. It was below because Amazon took such a big cut. And so I was raising the prices of the book to make it so that at least I'd make $1 or $2 off of Amazon. And I just got fed up with it and decided I'm not giving Bezos any more money. So I quit doing, and nothing recently has been released to Amazon anymore.
Okay.
It's all strictly GaryHillAuthor.com. You can find the links, and they're all through Lulu.
Fine. Perfect. I'm good to know that. So the last question that officially to ask you is what kind of things do you have online down the road?
Well, I've got spooky stories, which is a collection, sort of like spooky houses, of a lot of just spooky stuff. And then that comes out on September 4th, and a collection of my work, which is, it has 6 fiction pieces, one of which has never been published before, and some paranormal nonfiction, and then some reviews that I've done that have been published in different places. Actually, 3 old poems of mine that have been published several places. All that is in Relics, Remnants, and Artifacts, which comes out also on September 4th. And then the next book in line after that is going to be Horrifying Holidays, which I've been wanting to do for a couple of years. Because I don't know if you know this, but it used to be that Christmas wasn't so much a time of light and brightness, but they told ghost stories and spooky stories at Christmas. Because think about it, it's the solstice and it's the shortest day of the year. And so they told spooky stories. And so I want to put the spooky back in Christmas. So I'm getting a collection together. I've got 3 of my stories, and then I've got a story from a gentleman named Stephen Osborne, a story from a gentleman named Glenn Tilson, and a poem from a guy named Frank Kaufman. And then I'm going to have some nonfiction pieces in there about hauntings that are based around Christmas.
Wow.
And then a lot of public domain to sort of fill it out. But it's going to be cool. That's going to come out in October. I don't remember exactly which date, but October. I'm still working on putting that together. So that should be fun.
You are prolific.
I try to be.
Well, you are. I'm sitting here listening to you. I've done one novel and coming out with another, and that has eaten up a chunk of my life. But you are prolific.
Well, I should say I wrote freelance a lot of the time, and the only way you can make money writing freelance is if you pump stuff out in a hurry. You get used to the fact that you're never going to be completely satisfied with something, but it reaches a point where it's like, okay, that can go out. You just have to get to that point. And I'm pretty good at writing fast, and because I had to.
Wow. So this has been great, this time with you. Truly, I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and we decided just a few minutes ago that you and I, and we'll talk about it when we go off air, that we'll just have a conversation about cemeteries. I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do this sometime. That'll be fun.
Where, by the way, I think then we'll just call it cemeteries, Gary Hill.
There you go. Works for me.
Yeah. So I thank you, Gary, for your patience.
Oh, thank you, Calvin. Thank you for your patience with me. We had a lot of things going on here, and
it's perfectly understood. And I'm thrilled to officially met you now.
Yeah, me too. This is great. And so let's stay in touch for sure.
Gonna stay in touch. Do come back, and
will do.
Thank
Anytime
you
want me back, I'll come back.
Fine. That's perfect. Perfect. Thank you, Gary.